I'm Colin, and in this video we're going to cover the mistakes that can be made when installing polymeric joint sand, as well as how to fix them. The most important thing to having a proper polymeric sand installation is that everything is bone dry. Not just the materials themselves, whether it's paving stones or slabs, but the bedding material underneath them. If that bedding material is wet, if you install that project maybe in the wintertime or early spring, and you go to compact those stones, you will pump all that moisture up out of those sand joints that don't have any sand in them yet. You'll make the paver surface wet, and you will not have a proper installation of that polymeric sand. Whatever moisture comes into contact with, even if it's before the watering cycle to have a proper installation, it will stick to that and harden to it and look very unsightly. It's incredibly crucial that your paving stones or whatever the material is on the project, as well as the bedding material underneath it, is bone dry before you compact that material. It's incredibly crucial to the performance of your joint sand to be as dense as possible. And the way that you achieve that is by compacting the material you install. If you're using a larger format product like a concrete interlocking slab or some porcelain tile or natural stone, you may not be able to use a motorized plate compactor, as it could break that material. You want to at the very least use a rubber mallet or a rubberized hand tamper to help wiggle those stones around as much as possible to make that sand nice and tight. The tighter it is, the better it'll perform over lengths of time. One of the more common things we see in the paver world, especially with polymeric sand, is overfilled sand joints. There are some people out there that like the idea of having that sand flush with the top of the paver and kind of like grout lines weaving through your interlocking hardscape. While this may be aesthetically pleasing to some, it does not help the material or the project perform at all structurally, and also as the material flexes over time, because pavers are a flexible system, a lot of that joint material will flake and crust off, and you'll have a mess on your hands. It's always best practice to sweep that sand as low as you can into those paver joints and then blow off the excess sand as carefully as possible to reduce that from happening, both for an aesthetic reason as well as for structural. While avoiding the previous mistakes we talked about the installation of polymeric sand, none of them are as important or as bad looking as overwatering your polymeric sand. It's very easy to do, as there's lots of different instructions out there on the proper watering process and blowing process, but if you put too much water in those joints at one time, it will wash all those polymers up to the top of the stone. As the water goes away, those polymers stay on top of that paver or large slab, and when it dries, they can turn out hazy or discolored. What I do to reduce that from happening is I'll usually have a hose in one hand and a leaf blower in the other, or maybe a second person holding that leaf blower to rid of all that excess water as quickly as possible. This keeps it off the top of the stone to reduce those polymers from drying on there, as well as put more water into those joints to promote structure. If you accidentally made some of these mistakes when installing a polymeric sand, or maybe you hired a contractor and he made those mistakes and you're stuck with fixing them, there are a couple remedies or solutions for you. If you have a little bit of haze or a lot of haze throughout your entire project on the surface of your paving stones, you can use boiling hot water or SureStrip to remove that. If you have a sealer on those paving stones, you might not want to use SureStrip, as it will remove the sealer as well. With the boiling hot water, all you have to do is get some boiling hot water and a brush, scrub at those areas with the haze, and rinse it off. If that's not quite doing the trick, you can move on to a hot water pressure washer so you can get some of that natural agitation to help work the polymeric haze off the top of the stone. If you want to use SureStrip, if that's available to you, you just dump a little bit on your area, let it dry for about 10 minutes, and then scrub and work off that SureStrip, and it should remove a lot of that polymeric haze. If you have overfilled joints and it's crusting and flaking off and you want to make it a little more uniform or good looking, if it's a small area, it may be best just taking a scraping tool and kind of working off the top end of that polymeric sand. That way you don't compromise the structure of those polymers underneath the overfilled portions. Another way is also with boiling hot water. You can take that water and a scrub brush and kind of work at the overfilled joints to kind of work it down to a more uniform low joint level, or the same thing with the SureStrip. It will melt those polymers in that polymeric sand in order to make it malleable and movable so you can remove that excess joint material. You just want to be careful not to use a lot of this product, as it will melt the polymers in a lot of polymeric sand if you put it in areas where you don't need it. Hopefully you had the chance to see this video before you installed your polymeric sand, so you knew exactly what not to do. If you already have polymeric sand installed and there's a couple of those mistakes that we talked about, hopefully our tips and tricks were great in making your polymeric sand look better. If you want to see more projects you can do yourself, check out our website, westerninterlock.com, or our YouTube channel for our how-to videos at Western Interlock.